5, 4, 3. You got everybody? Okay. Oh, I'm on. Sorry, I'm looking at y'all. Good afternoon and welcome to the Public Service Commission of South Carolina. It is Wednesday, June 28th, about 2:02 p.m., and we are here continuing the hearing in docket number 2023-1-E. This is a hearing we started yesterday, Tuesday morning, and hopefully concluding this afternoon. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Caston. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, and Chair Belser. As we left yesterday, Office of Regulatory staff was presenting their witnesses. I note that we have counsel for Duke, counsel for Nucor, counsel for ORS in the room, and we have counsel for Safe CCL virtually appearing. ORS, Mr. Mustian, or Mr. Trawick, you have something to present to the commission. You need to borrow my copy?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the commission. After yesterday, when we orally put on the record that the parties had reached an agreement in principle regarding a stipulation in this matter as it relates to Winter Storm Elliott costs, we went to work and were able to reduce that to writing and agree upon terms, and that was filed shortly before we appeared in the hearing room this afternoon. Just wanted to give sort of an oral overview. Of course, the stipulation terms speak for themselves. But wanted to note at the outset, of course, that no party has recommended a disallowance in this proceeding or any imprudencies. But we decided to stipulate to this matter to hopefully put the Winter Storm Elliott issue in its proper context, given the ongoing investigation and examination into the company's rolling outages during that storm. So with respect to the terms, the stipulating parties agreed that the recovery in this proceeding of purchase power costs incurred during Winter Storm Elliott is without prejudice to the right of any stipulating party to object to or defend the prudency of such costs in the next rate proceeding, whether a fuel proceeding or a base rate case, whichever is more appropriate for the potential costs at issue, if necessary and as appropriate. The stipulating parties further agree that they may advocate for or defend against, and that the commission may approve or disapprove in such a rate proceeding adjustments related to purchase power costs incurred during Winter Storm Elliott. The stipulating parties agree that this stipulation is reasonable and is in the public interest, is in accordance with law and regulatory policy, and agree to support the resolution of issues agreed to herein in this proceeding and not to undertake any action to undermine that support. It, of course, is not a waiver or acceptance of the position of any stipulating party or its affiliates in any current or future proceeding in South Carolina or in any other jurisdiction, but is confined rather to this proceeding. ORS, of course, is charged with representing the public interest, and ORS stipulates in this agreement that the stipulation reached among the stipulating parties serves the public interest as it's defined in Section 58.410B of the South Carolina Code. Madam Chair, that stipulation has been signed by all parties to this proceeding, and so therefore we would ask that the commission accept the stipulation, enter it into the order, and approve the fuel factors set forth in Dana Harrington's testimony for the period of August 2023 to July 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Trawick. Is there anything that any party wishes to add to what Mr. Trawick has stated?
No, Madam Chair.
Nothing further from the parties. Mr. Trawick, at this point, are you offering the stipulation into evidence?
Yes, Madam Chair. Yes, Madam Chair, we would move it into evidence as the next hearing deposit exhibit.
we will accept the stipulation as a hearing exhibit. It will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit 10 and received into the evidence of this case. Now, Mr. Trawick, in your soliloquy there, you asked that we accept the stipulation. Please realize that accepting it into evidence is not an acceptance of the stipulation. That will be done at a later time when the commission takes up the case.
Understood, Madam Chair.
At a business meeting.
Of course.
Okay. But thank you for producing this and putting that into the record.
And thank you to the commission for the time to allow the parties to collaborate on this issue.
I think we have a question. Commissioner Williams?
Can I ask a question about the stipulation?
Sure.
In the third whereas, and this may be customary, but I went and looked at the a non-docketed 2023 1E, and it references Duke Energy Progress, but what I see in the whereas, it says the service territories of the company, which clearly would include Duke Energy Progress, but was there a reason Duke Energy Progress isn't listed under that third whereas?
Commissioner Williams, as I read it, this says in the service territories of the company, and the company was previously defined above as DEP.
Okay.
In that sort of
that makes
introductory
sense.
paragraph.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification.
Sure.
Does that answer?
Yes.
Commissioner Thomas?
Thank you. So the stipulation says that the costs could be taken up in a future rate proceeding, and it could potentially be a rate case or a fuel case. So who gets to make the call?
Commissioner Thomas, it would be one of the stipulating parties.
Commissioner Thomas, if I could add, the cost at issue in the stipulation are purchase power costs. So I think the appropriate proceeding would be a fuel proceeding, but we did agree yesterday with the parties to include reference to both potential rate proceedings in the stipulation. So that's what's reflected in the stipulation. But I would defer to ORS if they have anything to add there.
No, I think that's stated correctly, Commissioner. I think as we looked at that provision, at least my interpretation of it was it's whatever the next proceeding is. So it's the most expedient in time. So if DEP were to file a rate case, say, and it came to a hearing in December, then if there was a recommended adjustment, then you would be allowed to go ahead and make that adjustment in that proceeding. If there is no rate case, then it would be in the next fuel case, which would obviously be next year in the June timeframe. So at least my interpretation of it is really an acknowledgement that once that report gets issued in, I believe it's in July, is what the plan is, that whatever that next rate proceeding is, we would have the ability to address it at that time, if that makes sense.
It does. I guess my concern would be is that this potentially could just get lost in a rate case. There's so much going on, and it clearly to me is related to a fuel case, and that's a concern to me, is that small issue in a big rate case and maybe wouldn't get the attention that it deserves.
Well, I certainly understand that concern. From ORS's perspective, I mean, we certainly, depending on what the outcome of our investigation is in the non-docketed item, we certainly would track that issue, and if we felt that an adjustment was appropriate and necessary, we would certainly recommend that. It wouldn't get lost in our investigation, but I understand your concern as far as the detail and depth of information that goes into a rate case. So.
Okay. And the other thing I'm wondering about is when will the amounts of the purchased fuel be known or available?
I believe we were awaiting some instructions regarding a late filed exhibit, was my understanding.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that a little bit later, I believe.
I would note, just put the parties on notice, as you may have surmised from yesterday, commissioners have a lot of questions about this issue. So when you say that it may be up to the parties to put it forth, I suggest that the parties be prepared in the next case, depending on what comes out of the investigation, to be able to address these issues.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Understood. Thank you.
Is that it on the stipulation?
That's it on the stipulation.
Thank you, Mr. Trawick.
Thank you.
Mr. Mustian, you ready?
Believe so. So ORS will call as its next witness, Dr. Maria Rimpani, who I believe should be available virtually.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rimpani.
Good afternoon.
Okay. I'm going to ask the court reporter to swear you in as a witness, please.
If you would raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give both the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Dr. Rimpani, first, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Maria Rumpani.
Okay, and by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I am the technical director at Strategic Consulting.
In connection with this proceeding, did you prepare or cause to be prepared 24 pages of direct testimony in both redacted and confidential formats?
Yes.
Okay. Do you have any corrections, additions, or deletions to that testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you those same questions, would your answers be the same?
Yes, they would.
Okay. Madam Chair, I would ask that Dr. Rimpani's direct testimony, both the redacted and the confidential versions, be entered into the record of this proceeding as if given orally from the stand, and that the confidential version also be maintained under seal, as I believe the Commission has previously ordered.
Dr. Rimpani's pre-filed direct testimony, both the redacted and the confidential, will be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand, with the confidential version being maintained under seal as previously afforded confidential designation by Commission order.
Okay. Dr. Rimpani, did you also prepare one exhibit identified as Exhibit MR-1 in both redacted and confidential formats?
Yes, I did.
And do you have any corrections, additions, or deletions to that exhibit?
No.
Madam Chair, I would ask that Dr. Rimpani's Exhibit MR-1 be entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit, and for the confidential version to be treated as confidential under seal.
Dr. Rimpani's Exhibit MR-1 will be marked for identification as hearing exhibit number 11, and it received into the evidence of this case. The confidential version of her exhibit will be maintained under seal.
Dr. Rimpani, have you prepared a summary of your direct testimony, and if so, could you provide it at this time, please?
Yes, of course. So, good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to present findings and observations regarding the analysis that Duke Energy Progress employed to inform its decision-making and its actual operations during the events of Winter Storm Elliott. My observations focus on December 24, since this was the day DEP customers experienced loss of load. Several factors contributed to that result. Load exceeded the forecast, fossil fuel generation units underperformed, firm purchases were curtailed, and the automated load setting tool failed. The situation was exacerbated by the fact that DEP's Robinson Nuclear Unit 2, with a nameplate capacity of 769 megawatt, was in a planned outage.
Chair Belser.
Based on my review,
Just a moment, Dr. Rimpani. Commissioner Williams.
Chair
Slow
Belser,
down.
if Dr. Rimpani could speak a little slower, it would be easier to understand everything that you're saying, and I don't want to miss anything.
of course, yes.
Thank you.
Based on my review, I find that DP acted reasonably to minimize load interruptions within the time frame examined in this fuel docket. However, the company was constrained because several of its fossil fuel units underperformed. First, I note that the load forecast was inaccurate and under projected system needs. Still, even under a more accurate projection, load setting would have occurred, as at the time, DP had committed all available resources. My recommendation is that the company conduct a review of its forecasting methodology, focusing on the events of the storm and outlining the steps to improve its forecasting analysis. especially with consideration to forecasting load during extreme weather events. I understand that following their own evaluation, the company has already started such a review process and recommend that the resulting information and conclusions are made available to the Commission, ORS, and other interested parties. Second, system operations called on rotating load set to temporarily disconnect groups of customers on a rotating basis in order to reduce load on the system. However, the process was complicated by an automated tool failure that required manual response. The failure of the automated tool seems to have contributed to the load setting events by prolonging them, but was not by itself the cause of the resource inadequacy. Had the tool operated as expected, power would have been restored for all customers that were de-energized right after the need for load set ceased. I understand that Duke has started an investigation into what happened and what can be improved. I agree that Duke should pursue corrective actions to ensure that investing in the tool is justified and that if ratepayers are paying for it, it results in actual benefits. Third, given the evidence available, the company acted reasonably to enable load reduction from demand-side resources. However, some demand-side resources underperform, even though at a lower scale than generation sources. Demand response automation had the potential of further reductions, while residential demand response was not called on December 24. To ensure transparency and consistency in planning and operations, I recommend that the company included a discussion of its existing demand response resources, their cost and performance, and the reasons programs were not called or underperformed on December 24, 2022 in its demand-side management proceeding. Finally, DP experienced several issues with its generation units that resulted in the loss of several megawatts throughout the event. Outside of the load setting hours, the underperformance of the coal units, among others, also led to increased costs from firm purchases. For example, during hours 15 to 18, approximately half of DP's coal capacity was unavailable, while DP had to purchase power at a high price from PJM. Several combustion turbine units experienced startup failures after an attempt to start them remotely. Many of those issues were quickly addressed when a CT tech was dispatched to the location to inspect the units. Given how acutely aware Duke was of the upcoming issues, and the issues several of those units have experienced in the past, I note that it may have been more reasonable to have a staffing plan with CT techs and other staff in these stations instead of starting them remotely. Based on this, I recommend that DP revisit its practices for days when system emergencies are expected or ongoing to prevent otherwise avoidable forced outages. Finally, DP also experienced the loss of larger generation units due to freezing issues. Specifically, Smith Energy Unit 8, a natural gas combined cycle unit, and Mayo 1, a coal unit, experienced derates on December 24, 2022. Both instances are characterized as freezing issues with a frozen sensing line and an uninsulated part of tubing. Once those were thawed and insulated, the units returned to operations. Given DP's completion of the cold weather preventative maintenance items in fall 2022, a question can be raised as to whether these outages could have been prevented. Therefore, I recommend that the company re-examine and improve upon its procedures to ensure that any outages that could be prevented by proper weatherization are actually avoided. The company should conduct a comprehensive review of the performance of the fossil fuel units and whether the issues experienced could be avoided in the future, with a list of corresponding corrective actions. Should the cause of failure for specific resource types be found to be outside of the company's control, future planning efforts should account for its potential unavailability. This concludes my summary. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rimpani. Madam Chair, the witness is available for cross-examination and questions by the commissioners.
Thank you, Mr. Muschin. Nucor Steel, South Carolina.
No questions, Madam Chair.
South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and SACE.
No questions.
Thank you. Duke Energy Progress.
No questions.
Thank you. Commissioners, Commissioner Justin Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon or good evening, ma'am. Dr. Rapani?
I think your mic is on. Yeah, it is.
Hello?
I'm
Can you
sorry.
hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you for joining us today. I have what I consider a very simple question. If it's not, let me know. Based on your recommendations for the company, for things they can improve or for investigations they need to conduct to determine what went wrong where, considering that load shedding occurred, considering that the company had to purchase power at a higher cost, do you believe their customers should pay that additional expense?
Thank you for the question. And it might not be such a simple answer on that question. So yes, the company and ratepayers might have to pay a higher cost than would otherwise be possible had the units operated as expected. But also in the course of operations, I do understand that outages occur, especially during extreme weather events. And based on my review, I have not concluded that these outages, that I could say confidently that these outages could have been avoided. So my recommendation is more forward-looking for procedures that could reduce this probability in the future and has not resulted in a finding that they should have been avoided. And therefore, the ratepayers do not have to pay for that cost. Does that answer the question?
You gave a great response. I don't think it answers my question. Now, let me be very, very clear. If you can't answer the question, then that's fine. You can't make up an answer. If you don't know, if you don't have an opinion, that's okay. I'm not trying to lead you in any direction, but we spent a lot of time talking about this issue. And quite frankly, let me speak for myself. My primary concern, understanding that we live in an imperfect world, did Duke Energy perform in a manner that should cause them to suffer the cost of the additional expenses during Winter Storm Elliott? To me, it's a very simple issue. I understand that things go wrong. I understand that forecasts are off. I understand that machines fail from time to time. I understand all that. But considering all of those concessions, should ratepayers pay the additional expense caused by the failures, the mistakes, however you want to describe them, the unfortunate events? Should the ratepayers have to pay that cost, that additional expense?
Again, based on my review, and I know that ORS is currently, undertaking a more extensive review. I have not made a recommendation for any disallowance, which would mean that I think that this would be a reasonable expense for ratepayers given the situation.
Okay, I think I understand your answer. I just want to repeat it to you. Are you saying that you have not made an assessment of whether or not ratepayers should pay the additional expense?
No, I'm saying that I made that assessment and I found that the company can recover that cost based on my review.
Okay.
Again, I know that RS is undertaking another investigation as well, but based on my review, I concluded that the company can recover that cost.
Okay, cool. So I just want to state it clearly because we communicate differently, and I'm just going to put it in my words. Regardless of the additional expense incurred during Winter Storm Elliott, your opinion is the company performed reasonably and prudently, and therefore any additional expense incurred should be paid for by their customers.
Yes.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you, Commissioner Williams. Commissioners, questions? Commissioner, I'm not sure. Commissioner Caston or Commissioner Irvin?
Commissioner, go first. That's fine.
Commissioner Irvin.
Thank you. Mr. Rampani, let me make sure I understand your last answer. Or answers. And let me go back just for a moment and be clear, because I had some difficulty understanding your testimony. Did I hear you say that some of the failures that you described could have been avoided had the company taken certain steps prior to the storm arriving?
Yes.
What were those steps that could have been taken to prevent the rolling outage on December the 24th, 2022 in their South Carolina territory?
And I'm going to caveat that a little bit by saying that, I don't know whether the full extent and length of the outages could have been prevented, but certainly it could be, at a lower scale. For example, some of the larger units, they went into a derate and they lost a significant amount of generating power. And those were characterized by DP as freezing issues. So there was, for example, a frozen sensing light or some tubing that was not properly insulated. Now, once that was fixed, the unit was able to return to operations. Had that occurred before the forced derate, these could have altogether been avoided. Now, if I may add,
before you go further, I apologize for interrupting, but let me make sure I understand. There were problems with the system's performance in some of these generating plants. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
And as it turns out, I thought I heard you say that these problems could have been avoided had they taken certain steps in advance. Is that your testimony?
Yes.
Okay. If they could have avoided the outage, why is it fair for customers to have to pay the additional sums? I believe it's $600,000 for the South Carolina portion. Is that your understanding?
Yes. So the fact that they could have been avoided doesn't necessarily, at least to my mind, mean that there is a trade-off of cost and benefit in every decision that one is making. I assume that during operations, like examining every single sensing line or tubing, again, might not be again, the most economic option. And since I think, based on my review, that those issues that occurred could have been avoided, but it's not during the regular course of business that they should have been avoided, if that makes sense.
Well, aren't customers entitled to safe and reliable electric service from their providing utility?
Yes, they are. My intention was to review and examine whether, the company had performed to the best of their abilities. Their business to avoid such outages, and I understand that there was some winterization and weather preparedness procedure that went on in fall. This might not have caught the specific issues that led to the outages, and I have not concluded that that was an omission that the company, should be held accountable for, and therefore disallow that amount.
Since the investigation is ongoing, wouldn't you agree that it's really premature for you to make a judgment yet as to whether it was reasonable and prudent under the circumstances at the time?
There is a parallel investigation, and for that I would have to defer to ORS, as I know they're looking into that in more depth. I have only looked into that for the scope of this period docket.
What caused the coal plants to fail? The company's coal plants, generating plants to fail.
Mm-hmm. So for Mayo 1, the coal plant that was derated on December 24, the freezing issue had to do with a portion of the tubing, I think, that was uninsulated.
And was it exposed to the weather, or was it underground?
I do not have the answer to that.
Did you go to the site and do an on-site investigation?
No, I did not.
Has anybody at ORS done an on-site investigation?
Not that I know of.
Did you interview any of the employees on site at the utilities location, the affected plants? Did you go and talk with the operators of the plants?
No, I did not.
Did you not think that would be important to your testimony and your opinions?
It would be valuable to understand the full perspective, but in every case, we have to operate within the timeline and resources that we have available. And I did not do that for my review.
Yes, ma'am. What did you do in conducting your investigation and reaching this conclusion? Could you tell us what you did do? Did you interview anyone at the company?
No, I reviewed a lot of discovery from the company that was produced.
You didn't talk with anyone at Duke Energy Progress?
No, I did not.
No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Caston, did I hear you?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. And good evening, Ms. Rapani.
Good evening.
I believe you are the appropriate one to ask some of these questions to, and if not, let me know. Did the fossil fuel systems underperform or fail primarily from systems that would have had a proclivity to freeze or fail during an extreme weather event if basic winterization did not function adequately?
I am sorry, could you please repeat the question for me?
Yes, ma'am. Did the fossil fuel systems underperform primarily from systems that would have a proclivity that would tend to freeze or fail during an extreme weather event if basic winterization did not function adequately. Freezing lines, freezing valves and such.
My understanding is that sensing lines are vulnerable to weather issues, but I cannot speak as to, whether that is, the part of the generating station that would be more vulnerable or not. That's a little bit outside my expertise.
Wait a minute, I want to make sure I understood that. If during your review, did you review the systems or the generation facilities that failed and what failed in those facilities? Was that part of your review?
From a high level perspective and based on discovery, yes, but I didn't visit the plants or didn't do any physical investigation.
Okay. Well, let me ask this question, and if you don't know this either, perhaps the others won't be of value. Did any of the fossil fuel systems underperform or fail due to just major mechanical or catastrophic failures that could have been just totally unknown? It had nothing to do with winter weather or
No, my understanding is that no such big system failure occurred.
The winter storm warning that became known as Winter Storm Elliott. Did you have any information on that storm relative to forecast, how long it was forecasted before it occurred? Was that part of your investigation, or did you have any information on storm?
The weather forecast and how actual weather deviated from the forecast was not part of my review. The load forecast was, and I understand that the company had under projected load. That's probably related to the weather forecast, but I haven't reviewed the weather forecast itself.
Well, you're saying that the company, I guess, underestimated the load. As far as the winter storm itself, I guess what I was asking is, I think at least for a week or so, it was being forecast that very cold weather was coming and it was going to be very windy and there were going to be extreme wind chills. Were you aware of that information?
The company was aware and preparing through different load forecasts and generating operating plans, but I don't have more information as to other actions that they took.
Okay. Well, let me ask you this. In your opinion, and if you don't have one, that's okay. In your opinion, with a week or so's notice that such an event is coming, is going to happen, would this be adequate time to test and strengthen systems for freezing and such?
In my opinion, absolutely. Again, even if such actions occur, there is always the probability of something going wrong. But I agree with your statement.
Okay. Do you know from your investigation what amount of generation loss was due to equipment malfunction such as freezing lines, valves, and such versus other non-freezing causes?
I have not quantified that, but I know that two of the larger derates that happened on the system was due to freezing issues, and that was for Mayo 1 and Smith Energy, the combined cycle unit.
And that would have occurred not because of freezing, but could that have occurred because of other units dropping offline because of freezing? What would have caused that issue, or those issues?
The issues in those two units, the Mayo 1 and Smith Energy Center?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand that.
Yes. Could you please repeat the question? Was the question about the Mayo 1 and Smith Energy Center or for other units?
We can start with the Mayo 1 if you wish. I guess what I'm trying to understand is, okay, there were some units that did not function or underperformed, I think is the way you described it, due to cold weather things that cause lines to freeze or maybe a valve or something to freeze. And were there any other systems that underperformed absent some part of the system freezing? And I think you said that, well, let me stop there. Were there any other systems that underperformed absent something freezing?
Yes, I think another coal unit, the Roxborough 3 unit also was in a forced derate of 350 megawatt being unavailable. And that was not characterized as a freezing issue, but more of an equipment failure or a mechanical issue.
Commissioner Caston, may I ask you can you possibly turn up your microphone? The court reporter's having a little trouble hearing you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I believe that's all the questions I have. Well, one final more. And maybe you've answered it, but if you could do it, if you would try again. As briefly as possible, can you describe what system errors, if any, were avoidable?
In my testimony and standing here before you, I think there are a couple of different issues that could have been avoidable. One is when they tried to remotely start the combustion turbines, some of those failed. And my understanding again is that when a city tech, when an engineer went to the site, it was easy to address those issues and have them turn on and generate. So one issue that may have been avoidable was, if those resources were not started remotely, were not turned on remotely. But with a different staffing plan. Again, those are smaller resources. There are cities, and then the larger units, the Mayo one and Smith Energy Center, the combined cycle there, those had D rates, no outages, and my understanding again is that those were characterized as freezing issues with some portion of the equipment being uninsulated, and then it was addressed by thawing the line and returning it to the proper temperature and returning the unit to operations. And that could have been avoided.
Thank you, Ms. Rapani. I appreciate it, and hopefully you can get to bed earlier tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Madam
Commissioner,
Chair.
I had Commissioner Thomas next, so
That's
Vice
fine.
Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. So, Dr. Rapani, the first thing I would like to say is I wish we were having this hearing in Greece with you. That would be my desire. Anyway.
That would be nice.
Yes, it would. Anyway, so I've heard some things here, and I've heard you say that outages could have been avoided or prevented. And, looking at your testimony, you reveal some concerns with the company's decision-making and operations before and during the storm time period. And one of the things that, the important thing that guides what we have to do, obviously, is the law. And the fuel cost law says basically one of the standards is, did the company make every reasonable effort to minimize fuel costs? And so my question to you is, did the company make every reasonable effort to minimize fuel costs based upon its actions leading up to and during the storm?
Thank you for the question. First, I would like to define a little bit the time length at which I looked, and I only looked at the operations for Winter Storm Elliott. Could the company have done something different in their planning? That's not a question that I addressed, and I mean in planning, like their generation fleet, a year ahead or so on. So that's not something that I'm addressing with this response. But within the course of days prior to the event, my view did not identify a specific action that the company should have taken to avoid those outages. Although I cannot, I cannot state that they made every reasonable effort to do that because I have not exhaustively looked for that. But I didn't identify a single action that they could have done to avoid those outages, and they didn't do it.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. And hopefully I'll get to come see you one of these days.
Vice Chair Powers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Rapani, I too wish you a good evening, but, and I really only have one question, but I need to preface it. Between pages, I think about 5 and 8 of your testimony that you provided you go through a list of different things from a booster fan trip, switch failure, a valve failure, boiler feed pump problems, units that failed to start, tubing that was uninsulated, damaged conveyor belt. I mean, somewhere between 9, 10, and a dozen different issues that that you found, which leads me to my question. And my question was, were you provided any normal inspection reports, or did you request inspection procedures, or have any knowledge of just how the companies would have inspected these things even prior to the storm, or what sort of schedules they used, or any information that could possibly, with some of these failures, have made a difference?
I know that the companies performed weather preparedness procedure in phone. I have not seen reports that would address those specific failures. Yes, I have not reviewed reports that would address those specific ones.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. That's all I have.
Commissioner Carolee Williams.
Thank you, Chair Belser. Hello, Dr. Rampani. Good evening. I am looking at your testimony and looking at the top of page 5, where you talk about during day-ahead power trading on December 23rd, 24th, and I'm seeing December 26th, which suggests I don't understand this. But what I see is 540 megawatts of firm energy, increased purchases to 540 megawatts of firm energy for December 24th, and 540 megawatts of firm energy for December 26th, and 500 megawatts, and I don't understand the next part. Would you explain that paragraph for me? That's where I should have started.
You're looking at page 5. Okay, during day-ahead power trading on December 23, DP increased purchases to 540 megawatt of firm energy. Yes, so again, based on discovery, the company was aware of the upcoming issues, and they knew that they didn't have enough reserves going into the 24th. So they tried to purchase power from PJM. At that time, they were limited in what they could do because all of the neighboring systems were experiencing the same conditions and preparing for the same event. So there wasn't a lot of availability, and they purchased 540 megawatt for Saturday. Unfortunately, not all of that was available during the day. There were some curtailment.
So it looks like they purchased a similar amount 2 days in a row. Is that true?
Yes.
And is there, from your investigation, is there any understanding of an overall cost of that amount? Because this is increased purchases. Are these purchases typical on the company's part?
My understanding was that these are the reliability purchases that witnesses talked about yesterday as well, and the total amount that would be associated with this increased volume. I haven't done the exact calculation, but the number that was quoted yesterday in the order of 6.6 million sounds about right to me.
And that was for North Carolina and South Carolina. Is that true?
Yes, that was for the system. Yes.
Okay.
Exactly. DP.
I'm shifting to ask you a question about forecasting, and because you testified that the forecast methodologies were not accurate, and I'm looking at page 11, and this is more of a curiosity, but do forecasts reflect the special, unique needs of Christmas Eve and Christmas Day? Or are they, or would they be based on any Saturday and Sunday?
No. This is not a forecast that's repeated every Sunday for December, for example. That's specific to that date. So these forecasts should reflect both the fact that it is a holiday, it is a weekend, there is a winter storm coming.
Would the amount of business activity on Saturday the 24th have been reflected in the model?
I would expect so, yes.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I have one final question, and that is, how do you connect your testimony that Duke Energy Progress acted reasonably associated with the resulting expenses related to Winter Storm Elliott?
Madam Chair, if I could just ask real quickly, I do mean this respectfully, and maybe I'm misremembering. I would ask, I first would ask Commissioner Williams if she would be willing to point to the testimony that she's referring to in that regard. I do believe that may be a mischaracterization of what Dr. Rumpani stated. I could be remembering it wrong, but it would be helpful if the commissioner could
Do you have a page
identify
number,
to the witness what she's referring.
Do not have a page number. I may need a colleague to help me recall who was asking that question, and so I appreciate your pointing that out. And I'll withdraw the question unless I can connect the dots while we're still with this witness.
Could you ask your question again?
Yeah.
What was your question?
My question was, how do you connect the testimony that Duke Energy Progress acted responsibly with regard to Winter Storm Elliott and the associated expenses?
Yeah, I don't know if that's in pre-filed testimony.
Okay.
That might have been in response to a question.
And that maybe that's connecting questions. I just did not recall that connection, so that was just a clarification.
Is that, let's ask Dr. Rumpani, is that something you can answer, or do you have a recollection of that or not, Dr. Rumpani?
I am not sure I understand the question.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. No further questions.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners,
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Justin Williams.
Thank you. Dr. Rumpani, I think it's fair to assume that you believe your testimony, your opinion is reasonable. But I want to ask you an obvious question. But you believe that your testimony and your opinion on this issue is a reasonable position, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, considering your level of expertise and academic experience, do you also believe it's reasonable if someone had a different opinion on the same issue?
Yes.
So it wouldn't shock you if someone were to review the same facts and conclude that Duke's customers should not carry the additional expense incurred due to the failure in performance or the inadequate performance.
That is correct.
All right. Thank you very much, ma'am. No further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Dr. Rupani, I have just a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Of course.
Tell me the scope of your review. My recollection is you've indicated that you have reviewed responses to discovery propounded by Duke. Is that correct?
Yes. The scope of my review was to look at the decision making during Winter Storm Elliott, and whether there was any issue or action that could have, happened differently to prevent the outages or lower costs for ratepayers.
Okay, so you were tasked with looking to see if, as part of your review, whether there were actions which of the company that could have prevented the deratings and the outages. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. We appreciate your testimony. Mr. Mustian, is there any redirect?
Madam Chair, I apologize. I certainly don't want to delay this proceeding. Could I possibly ask for some indulgence of 10 minutes just for a quick break to consult with my client? And
Okay. We will break until 3:15, and then we'll keep going after that. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon. We are back from a quick break in docket number 2023-1-E. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. With us virtually, we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Caston. In the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, and Chair Belser. Mr. Mustian, redirect.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a few brief questions. Dr. Rumpani, are you still with us? Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. So I just wanted to ask just a couple of questions, and I appreciate Chair Belser's question at the end regarding your scope of work, but I just want to make sure I understand and that the record is clear with respect to what you were tasked to do by ORS in this proceeding. Could you just provide an additional explanation of that again, please?
Yes, of course. So the scope of my review was limited to what happened during Winter Storm Elliott, and more in the decision making of the company, whether any of their decisions for the operations of their fleet were not reasonable and not towards minimizing costs for ratepayers.
And I understand that during the course of the commissioner's questions, there was some discussion about how your analysis related to fuel costs, but I want to make sure I understand as far as it goes with respect to what you were asked to do by ORS. Did your analysis include an analysis of whether the operations had during Winter Storm Elliott had an impact or should have an impact on fuel costs?
Yes.
Okay. And as part of your analysis, I want to look at your what you did with respect to the review in this proceeding. Could you just give me a little overview of the amount of documents that you received, the types of analysis that you did? Could you just give me an overview of what you did to perform your analysis in this proceeding?
Yes, of course. So there was a lot of discovery in this proceeding, and I reviewed all of it, starting with the narrative of what happened that was provided by the company, and then a lot of spreadsheets that were looking into the hourly operations of the different units, the load forecast, how much energy was imported, how much energy was curtailed, and spreadsheets that included brief explanations of all the outages or the derates of the units during those days.
And just as kind of a benchmark, if you were to estimate the number of documents or the number of pages that you reviewed in connection with this proceeding, could you provide the commission with an estimate?
Of the number of documents?
Correct. Just an estimate, if you're able to do so. Or an order of magnitude. Was it large, small, big, little?
There were a lot of documents. A lot of them included some, like the same information. So I just had to compile all of them together. I'm gonna say maybe like 50 of those were relevant, but I know that ORS asked for more. The company has provided more documents.
And are you aware, if you are, were there other members of ORS's team that looked at the operations of Duke Energy Progress during the review period? Not just Winter Storm Elliott, but the review period as a whole?
Yes, that is my understanding, that ORS witnesses looked at the entire review period, including Winter Storm Elliott, while my review was limited to those days.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Mustian. Any limited recross? Nucor?
Chair.
Say CCL?
No, Chair Melser.
Thank you. Mr. Trawick?
Briefly,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
On matters brought out, new matters brought out.
All right. Good afternoon, Dr. Rumpani. I'm not sure what the time is there, but thanks for appearing virtually with us today. Dr. Rumpani, you did not articulate any findings of imprudence or unreasonableness in your pre-filed direct testimony, did you?
I did not.
Okay. In fact, on page 22, lines 10 through 12 of your pre-filed direct testimony, you opine that DEP made reasonable efforts to have its units available and to acquire firm purchases in anticipation of the weather event. Isn't that right?
Yes, that's right.
And even with what you allege to be underperformance of its fossil fuel units on page 22, line 12 of your pre-filed direct testimony, you did not recommend any disallowances, did you?
I did not recommend any disallowance.
Dr. Rumpani, as you recognize in your pre-filed direct testimony, plans had to change based on the evolving facts during those 2 days, correct?
Correct.
And of course, we have to judge prudence and reasonableness under the circumstances then and there existing, right?
Yes.
And so it's easy to look back with the benefit of hindsight with an eye toward perfection, but that's not the standard we're looking at, correct?
That is my understanding.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Rumpani. No further questions.
Commissioners? Thank you. Dr. Rupani, thank you for your testimony today. And for, I don't know, like I said, I'm not sure what time it's there either, but appreciate you hanging in here with us. Thank you very much. You may stand down. Ms. Rainey, are you presenting the next witnesses?
Yes, I am.
Please proceed.
ORS calls Mr. Robert Lawyer and Mr. Anthony Brazino to the stand.
Do you solemnly affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Thank you. Good afternoon, gentlemen. Mr. Lawyer, we'll start with you. Mr. Lawyer, please state your full name for the record.
My name is Robert A. Lawyer.
Whom are you employed by and in what capacity?
I am the Director of Energy for the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff.
Are you the same Robert A. Lawyer who pre-filed 8 pages of pre-filed direct testimony in this proceeding on May 30th, 2023?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Do you have any changes, corrections to that pre-filed testimony?
No.
If I were to ask you the same questions posed in your testimony, pre-filed testimony, would the answers change?
No, they would not.
Chair Belzer Oras asks that Mr. Lawyer's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Lawyer's pre-filed direct testimony will be received into the record as if given from the stand.
And Mr. Lawyer, did you also pre-file one exhibit RAL1, which are a direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any changes or edits to that exhibit?
I do not.
Chair Belzer Oras asks that Mr. Lawyer's exhibit RAL1 be marked and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Lawyer's pre-filed exhibit attached to his direct testimony and denoted as Exhibit RAL1 will be marked for identification as Hearing Exhibit 12 and received into the evidence of this case.
Okay, Mr. Lawyer, please share your summary of your direct testimony at this time.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. The purpose of my testimony is to present ORS's review, Duke Energy Progress's Distributed Energy Resource Program, also known as DERP,
the expenses during the review period of March 2022 through July 2024. ORS reviewed the proposed annual DIRP charge of $12 for residential customers, $33.89 for commercial customers, and $100 for industrial customers. ORS finds the company's DIRP expenses were reasonably incurred and their calculations are in compliance with Act 236 and commission orders. The company also updated the value of distributed energy resources in accordance with previous commission orders. This concludes my summary.
Mr. Brazino, please state your full name for the record.
My name is Anthony D. Brazino.
And by whom are you employed and in what capacity?
I'm employed by the South Carolina Office of Regulatory Staff as an audit manager.
Are you the same Anthony D. Brazino that caused to be prepared 17 pages of pre-filed direct testimony in this docket on May 30th, 2023?
Yes, I am.
Do you have any changes or corrections to that testimony?
No, I do not.
And if I were to ask you the questions posed in your testimony today, would your answers change?
No, they would not.
Chair Belzer, I ask that Mr. Brazino's pre-filed direct testimony be entered into the record as if given orally from the stand.
Mr. Brazino's pre-filed direct testimony will be received into the record as if given from the stand.
And Mr. Brazino, did you also prepare 9 exhibits with your direct testimony?
Yes, I did.
Do you have any edits or changes to your exhibits at this time?
No, I do not.
Chair Belzer, I ask that Mr. Brazino's exhibit ADB 1 through ADB 9 be marked and entered into the record as the next hearing exhibit.
Mr. Brazino's pre-filed exhibits ADB 1 through ADB 9 will be a composite exhibit marked for identification as hearing exhibit 13 and received into the evidence of this proceeding.
Thank you. Mr. Brazino, did you prepare a summary of your testimony?
Yes, I did.
Please share it at this time.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. The purpose of my direct testimony is to explain the scope of ORS's examination of Duke Energy Progress's books and records as they pertain to the company's operation of the Fuel Adjustment Clause in the current filing, and to present the results of ORS's examination. ORS examined and verified the monthly over and under recovery calculations and balances as recorded by the company for the 12-month review period that ended February 2023. My direct testimony also explains the 9 exhibits that I sponsored for this hearing detailing these calculations. Based on ORS's review, ORS agrees with the balances and the adjustments as put forth by the company for the 12-month review period that ended February 2023, and this concludes my summary.
Thank you, Mr. Lawyer and Mr. Brazino. Please answer questions from the party and the commission.
Thank you, Ms. Rainey. Cross-exam, Nucor.
No questions, Madam Chair.
South Carolina Coastal Conservation League and Southern Alliance for Clean Energy.
No questions, Chair Belzer.
Duke Energy Progress.
No questions, Chair. Thank you.
Commissioners.
Madam Chair.
Commissioner Caston.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I want to ask, and it's probably you, Mr. Lawyer, and if you can answer the questions, fine. If not, you'll tell me, I'm sure. Very much the same questions I asked Ms. Rapani, if that's okay. Mr. Lawyer, were their fossil fuel systems, were they underperformed? Primarily from the systems that, would be prone to freeze during extreme weather events if basic weatherization wasn't adequate. Were there failures or underperformance from freezing because the systems weren't either winterized or not winterized properly or failed? Did that occur?
It is my understanding that those types of circumstances did occur. However, I would refer you back to Ms. Rapani for the specifics behind it. It was not part of the review I performed.
Well, that's one of the questions I asked her, and she said it was outside of her expertise, and that kind of threw me. I thought that was,
Or even witness Amari Thompson, who was with us yesterday, I know did a review of outages as well.
we're a little late for that now.
Yes, sir.
So I'm assuming any of these other questions that I ask her, if I ask you, well, let me blow through them. How's that?
I'm sorry?
I will just blow through these questions. If you can answer them, fine. If not, just say what you just said, I reckon. Relative to the winter storm that later became known as Elliott, was that an unknown winter storm that was coming? Was there adequate notice, do you think?
I can't speak to the notice of the storm. I think it was common knowledge that there was a storm coming. I'm not sure if the magnitude was known.
Well, okay. Gotta be honest, seems like I recall days in advance that very cold weather's coming and it's gonna be very windy with wind chills, but
Yeah, let me rephrase. Maybe in not the magnitude of the storm, but the magnitude of the results or what happened because of the storm is I think I misspoke.
but I understand that. But isn't the purpose of winterization preparation for that purpose?
You would think so. Again, Commissioner, this was not part of my review
Okay.
in this
All right.
case.
All right, well, let me just get down to, let me ask you this. If you were involved with this, let me know. I think in February 2021, Governor McMaster asked ORS to undertake a comprehensive review of our state's public and private power grid to evaluate its ability to withstand potential ice storms and other dangerous winter weather conditions. Did ORS complete this review?
Yes, sir, they did. And no, I was not a part of it.
Do you know if DEP participated in this review?
The 2021 review, sir?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I do not know if they did or not.
Okay. Well, it kind of falls, I mean, no point asking the rest of the questions. It is good to see you though, Mr. Lawyer, Mr. Messino, so I wish I was there personally, but hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
Thank
Madam
you,
Chair.
Commissioner. Commissioner Urban?
Thank you. Gentlemen, good to see you this afternoon. Thank you for your testimony. Did you hear the witness, assume you did because you've been in the room, but did you hear Ms. Ramponi's testimony earlier this afternoon?
Yes, sir.
Both of you?
Yes.
Did you hear her testify that it was her opinion that utility failed to properly insulate the certain parts of the coal-fired and gas-fired units, even knowing that a severe storm was headed our way? Did you hear her talk about that?
I'm not
Either
sure.
one of you.
Yes, I heard her testimony, Commissioner.
All right. If that testimony is to be believed, wouldn't that require the commission to take that into consideration in determining whether or not the company was reasonable and prudent in their fuel plans and
Belzer.
operations for the?
Just a moment. Just a moment. Ms. Rainey?
Chair Belzer, I object. That's pitting witnesses, and it leads to a legal conclusion.
Pitting witnesses is challenging the veracity of a witness, I believe, and I don't know that he's doing that here.
He asked if what.
Okay, Commissioner, can you rephrase the question, please?
Yes, I'm not asking about her veracity. I think she testified truthfully, but as to her conclusions, she testified that the company failed to properly prepare for the winter storm that was approaching Carolinas. And so my question is, shouldn't the commission take that into consideration in determining whether or not the additional cost of fuel to end the rolling blackout, which has been established by earlier testimony, is $600,000. Shouldn't that sum be subtracted from the amount of money that the company is seeking for fuel costs?
Well, to the first part of your question, Commissioner, I do think that this commission should take all information into account when making a decision. In this particular case, we stand with Ms. Rapani's findings. We do not have any recommended disallowances at this time.
Has ORS completed its investigation?
No, sir, that is still ongoing. And the date of, I think it's towards the end of July. I think we're still on track for that at this particular time.
Have you or anyone else from ORS been up to inspect the plants, the two plants that were the first to go out?
Not to my knowledge, sir.
Have you interviewed the operators at those two plants to determine what their remembrance of the events, the time frame of the events that occurred?
With the actual operators, I don't believe so. With the company, we've had discussions.
Right. I'm talking about the people that were on the scene at the time the emergency blackout or rolling blackouts occurred. Have you talked with the plant operators that were working that day on December 24th, 2022?
To the best of my knowledge, no.
No, sir.
Okay. All right. No further questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Irvin. Commissioners, any further questions of this panel? Hearing none. Ms. Rainey, any redirect?
No redirect.
Thank you. Gentlemen, thank you for your testimony today. You may stand down.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Commissioner Thomas, I see your light.
I was just wondering if we could take a short break. Just had a couple of thoughts that I need to think about.
10 minutes? Is that sufficient?
That's plenty. Thank you.
Let's take a break and return at, I'm going to say 3:50 on this one. Well, yes, it's 3:50, so it'll be about, 3:50. It'll be about 3:53 on that clock on the wall.
Madam Chair, just a clarification question. The witnesses can be excused? Or
They can stand down.
Stand down, yes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a 10-minute break, please. Good afternoon, and we are back at the Public Service Commission in the continuation of the hearing in docket 2023-1-E. Let's take a roll call of commissioners. Present in the hearing room, we have Commissioner Justin Williams, Vice Chair Powers, Commissioner Thomas, Commissioner Carolee Williams, Chair Belson, and with us virtually we have Commissioner Irvin and Commissioner Caston. Ms. Brown, Mr. Trawick, based on information yesterday, I have a request to a couple of questions for Mr. McClay and Ms. Harrington, and I would ask that they be recalled and to respond to a couple of brief questions.
Sure. I'm having a little trouble hearing you.
Okay. We want to recall Mr. McClay and Ms. Harrington to respond to commissioner questions.
Of course.
Thank you.
Are they being called out of order, or has ORS rested?
I'm sorry. ORS. Thank you, Mr. Trawick.
Thank you.
Mr. Trawick is always on the spot when it comes to procedures. So, that concludes ORS's case.
Thank you. I assumed, and I should know better than to assume. Thank you, Mr. Musty and Mr. Trawick. If Mr. McClay and Ms. Harrington would come forward, please. I would remind the witnesses that they are still under oath from yesterday, although there's some thought that you have to re-swear them the next day, but I think we're okay, unless there's an objection. Commissioner Thomas.
Thank you. I appreciate you two being back here today. That was a lot of fun yesterday. Maybe you need a little bit more today. I just have two kind of high-level questions, and this is what I would like to know. What was the cost of the purchase power that occurred as a result of the plant outages or derates for DEP during the Winter Storm Elliott, December 23rd through December 26th time period? What was the total cost for DEP?
Yeah, sure. So, as far as the total cost, there were all the purchases, as you know, were for reliability, right? So, in other words, they fell under reliability. So, which means that we were, we needed power, or I should say reserves, and those reserves were purchased. I'd like to just sort of give a little background, if you don't mind, and just sort of give you the process. I think that's where I'm really going. What happens on our desk, I think I explained the other day, was we have a 7-day forecast that's produced, unit commitment forecast, and there's a process on the power desk where they evaluate, they look at the forecast, they see ahead 7 days, which is a good look, based on all the inputs that we discussed yesterday, weather, prices, fuel prices, and things like that. And as we get closer to an event, in this case, this was the storm, we start taking action, right? Any storm, not even just this storm. And this is obviously a special time of year as well, because it's not the storm was over a holiday weekend, right? So that's, if you think about that, that's 4 days rather than a regular weekend, which is normally like a 3-day weekend, right? So there's a lot of things that we do to make sure that we're acting efficiently as well as prudently, to make sure that step by step we're covering what we need to cover in terms of reserves and power. Pardon me. So as we move forward, as we got into Wednesday, we started to see that our reserves for Sunday and Monday were going to be deficient for DEP. So what we did immediately, we have people in the real-time desk and the power desk are very seasoned, probably average between 15 and 20 years of experience, so they know what to do and how to do it. And they went out to the market to look for reserves and let the market know, although nobody wants to sell you power on Wednesday for Sunday and Monday, right? Because they don't know what it costs. So, so they went out and they reserved transportation, transmission into the system to make sure that they could cover, they took a prudent action that they could cover the reserves as best they could. As we got, also there were meetings that occurred, right, between the power desk, the gas desk, unit commitment, and as we got a little closer, also pipelines as well, right? We talked to pipelines and say, hey, how are you prepared? What are you doing? And so we get a bigger picture to make sure everyone's prepared. And of course, everyone can be prepared and things can go wrong. We know that, right? Compressors break, all types of things happen with units. So we review, you know, the best practices and see what everyone's doing, what they're seeing. So as we got into Thursday, we still noticed that there were more deficiencies in for Sunday and Monday, and we brought more transmission into the system, as well as had additional meetings and you know, to review the position of the reserves and the units. That's what we do, right? And it's on the 7-day report. It's on, you know, as you roll closer in that report, you get to see a little more. The weather becomes a little crisper. Your position, all of a sudden, you know, the units, derates, outages, whatever it is, just everything is updated every day. So then as we go to Friday, and Friday for the company was a holiday, but not for us, and the gas market was open. And the gas market trades for 4 days, as we know, because it's not open Saturdays, Sundays. In this case, the holiday for the gas market was Mondays. And the next time you would have a bite of the apple was Tuesday to do anything about gas. So we made our prudent decisions for fuel, right, and buying the gas and what we needed, and used that also as part of our input to the models, as we always do: price of gas, price of coal, price of everything, incremental. And we noticed on that 7-day report that we were now deficient for Saturday. So what we did was we went out, bought more transmission, and gauged the market. And at that point in time, we had the market was able to sell us power, right? Because it was coming into the weekend. They had a better picture on where gas costs were, power costs, where everything was trading, and we were able to sufficiently cover Saturday, Sunday, and most of Monday, what I recall. But Saturday was covered. So we had bought enough reliability power, right, which happened to be economic, because the cost of gas was $53 an M. And if you look at a replacement, you know, the next incremental unit would have been probably a CT, which is one of those less efficient turbines. So really the cost of power should have been around $700 replacement cost with a $53 gas price. So we had bought power at well under that, so it was extremely economic, from a counterparty that was taking it out of probably the most reliable power pool that there is out there, and that's PJM, right? You're not buying a unit, you're buying power out of a pool from the Northeast, so it's very reliable. In fact, we bought 500,000 megawatt hours in the last 3 years, and nothing's been cut. So it's as firm gets. So we bought that from the power pool, as well as some small pieces. We also looked for energy inside of our control area. And the control area, I mean, within DEP, DEC control area, because you don't have to worry about, you know, the transmission because it's already in your control area. So we had bought some, a little bit from inside the control area, and we found a unit as well to buy. So we were in pretty good shape. As the day wore on and into about 8 o'clock at night, the load started growing, growing higher and faster than we had anticipated, right? Than the load models gave us. The temperatures were good that we had in our forecast were relatively good, but the load response was a lot different. So they took action on the real-time desk, which is 24 hours, like I mentioned, and tried to buy some more energy just in case, although we looked like we had enough. And we got to midnight, and it was definitely, it was higher, and there was no more power to be bought. We bought everything we could. So everything that we had bought flowed through 5 o'clock in the morning, actually. So there was no reason to believe that there was an issue. Yes, we had higher, we did have a higher load. It looked like, we had a potential of being okay though, because we did have those purchases. And when we hit 5 o'clock and we started seeing little pieces of power get cut from the pool, obviously, from that point on, it was not much you could do, right? The company took other actions that they could do. Although from the sense of buying more power, we did try to buy some non-firm energy from the power pool at the same time, thinking maybe that would flow, and it didn't. And so from that point on, we did get another run in the morning, and we were short reserves for Sunday. Load was higher than we anticipated in the models, so that we obviously went out and we bought more transmission, and from that point on, we were buying prudently through the weekend as much as we could to cover our reserves. So that's sort of the process of how we and of course we had several meetings that's to be expected throughout the company, and we're keeping senior management informed. But that's sort of how it unraveled. And you have to think our neighbors that we talked to, they were also in a bad position, right? Everybody was in the same position, just trying to take care of their own and trying to deal with their own situation. So I just want to sort of say that up front. So, in terms of the costs, you probably you're the numbers person.
Sure. Well, I do not.
Please turn your microphone on. Thank you, Ms. Harrington.
Sorry about that. Yes, I don't have the numbers itemized by day. We looked yesterday at the 85,000 on my exhibit 2, page 1 for December month. And then within that 85, I said thousand, I meant million, excuse me, million, correction. 85 million yesterday on that exhibit that I don't have it in front of me right now, but I recall it from yesterday. That represents our economic purchases and our reliability purchases. So as I defined yesterday, the ones I spoke to about the 6.6 million is what I was labeling reliability, defined as to maintain an adequate reserve margin. And those purchases I was grabbing from the monthly fuel report and the support documents in the monthly fuel report for the month of December, explicitly deemed reliability. So everything else in the 85 million would be your renewables, your qualifying facilities, all of that energy that we take on a standard basis, as well as economic purchases. And I think that might be where some of the Winter Storm Elliott costs that you're asking about do land in the economic bucket, and not what I was referring to yesterday as the 6.6 million of reliability. Those were not deemed economic, but to maintain an adequate reserve margin. So I do not have that itemized by day or by hour or offsetting the units that were anticipated to run. I don't have that at our fingertips reach. I hope that helps. So there's some Winter Storm Elliott purchases that we discussed yesterday in the 85 million that were not reliability labeled. I hope that's helpful.
Yes, it is. Basically, what I would like is not a late filed exhibit, but that information spelled out very, very clearly, because this stuff's going to come up again, whether we sign off on the stipulation or not. It's going to have to be addressed at some point. Maybe the next fuel case, probably. I don't know. But I want those numbers just very clearly identified, not mixed up with, all the other normal stuff. And so basically, you can't answer that now. Then I want that the next time this comes up.
Yes, sir. Understood. Thank you very much.
Okay. All righty. And basically, so I wanted the full amount for the whole company and then break it out by how much of that is related that you allocated to South Carolina.
Yes, sir. And when you say the whole company, are you you're including DEC, like a composite view, I trust?
Well, I'd like to have that, but not sure I can ask for that in this proceeding. Okay. But yes, I would like to have that, but no, I don't think I can get it. So
okay.
There.
Understand. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I think that's all I have.
Thank you.
Commissioners, further questions?
Chair Belzer?
Commissioner Carolee Williams?
Just to add a little bit to what you shared, would you explain the difference between what an economic purchase is?
Sure. So what we do is we look at the incremental cost or the cost of the unit that we're buying under, right? And anything below that unit, like I just mentioned, somewhere around $700 would have been that level. Any purchases below that are considered economic, and that's that's your definition.
So how will you determine what was Winter Storm Elliott related, given reliability definition and given economic? You won't find it in those two definitions.
It's all reserves, right, that we had to buy.
Okay.
I mean, we're required to buy for DEP up to a certain amount or as best we can, and whether that's it's supposed to be firm, but if we have to buy non-firm, then we'll buy non-firm. We'll buy anything, and we bought as much as we could to get to to try to get to our reserve requirements. And it was evolving too, right? That it's you think you're okay, and then all of a sudden loads growing, and then we do have a 24-hour desk, like I mentioned, so they're reacting to that, and they're going to go out and try to help the situation as much as they can.
So I just to add to what Commissioner Thomas said and to ask for his input as well. We really want to understand the impact of Winter Storm Elliott and the labels of reliability and economic are not what are going to help us to understand that. But the reserves that were needed, it sounds like, is the bucket or the label that is going to be most helpful.
Right.
Is that? Do you agree, Commissioner Thomas?
Yes, I think you're helping clarify. Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you.
No further questions.
Thank you, Commissioners. Any redirect on Commissioner questions?
Madam Chair, could I ask one question?
Excuse me, Commissioner Caston, yes.
I wanted to make sure I understood. In Mr. McKay, in your discussion of coming into the storm or as the storm was approaching, it sounds like those are like pre-storm purchases for reliability or reserves, and those are required, and the company acquired those at a good value and price. Is that what you said? Is that what I understood?
Yes.
And I guess as you got into the storm, you said demands were different than anticipated. I guess higher than anticipated.
Load was higher, yes.
Correct. And now, with that occurring, with the demands higher than anticipating, is this the point when units started underperforming or dropping out for various and sundry reasons?
I believe it was a little bit probably during, maybe a little before, and then that's probably, you know, before, a little bit before the peak, but we made it through the peak. Obviously we had to curtail load, but yeah, I mean, I think, you know, also, you know, one of the purchases that we had made, which I didn't mention, inside the grid, inside of our control area, didn't start either, and that was 250 megawatts, and that wasn't even ours. So that's, you know, these things just happen. I think, you know, the cold weather came in. It's not just cold weather; it came in abruptly, very fast, and I think the speed of which it came in and the wind all contributed to, you know, to really mechanical things breaking. Right? That's what happens sometimes. Fortunately, you know, the pipelines were in good shape, but in past events, things happen on pipelines too. So.
I understand, and look, I'm not trying to accuse, point the finger, or armchair quarterback. Easiest thing in the world to do. I get it. But, you know, I'm still kind of struggling with I know it came in and the winds were blowing, but I guess I'm a little surprised that the company was this surprised, because I remember us talking about the storm, or people talking about the storm coming with winds and very cold temperatures. So was there something different, I mean, than the forecast said?
So I think a couple of things that come to mind. One is from Monday to the actual, you know, let's just say to Friday, and this is, you know, this is the Weather Service data too. The temperatures dropped 10 degrees. That's a lot. I mean, you know, to be off by 10 degrees, or, I mean, that's everybody's models, right? That's not just ours. But by the time we got there, we had I think our temperatures, to tell you the truth, were probably fairly accurate. They weren't that bad. But I think, you know, in the model itself, and you know, to find the load itself was a little off, because, I mean, to find a Saturday, day before Christmas, you know, 8 degrees or whatever the temperature was within the mile, probably just didn't, you know, we have 4 years of data or however many years of data, and it just didn't, it didn't find that kind of data to look back on, right? And project, you know, where the load should be. You know, it's a learning model, and obviously we have historicals and historical weather and correlations and things like that, but it didn't, you know, there was a gap there.
I honestly don't recall any of my textbooks ever talking about Murphy's Law. But only engineers know what that is, I suppose. One final question. If the systems that underperformed, if they had not underperformed, if the systems had performed as intended, would DEP's systems have met the increased loads or the unanticipated loads?
I don't, probably, but I honestly don't know. I don't know. I'd have to think about that. You know, there's always in every event, there's outages, right? Forced outages. You can't plan when they happen. You just know they're going to happen. And so, you know, there were some derates and things like that. But I think, you know, we took appropriate actions. And it's hard to say. I honestly don't know. I don't know where the load would have been, and I don't know.
Well, I understand, and I know, I believe DEP is a good company. There's no doubt about that. I don't think, and again, this really isn't a witch hunt. I'm not trying to make it that way. And I suspect, that I'm somewhat familiar with running a utility, certainly on a much smaller scale. But I often used to think, and we even said it, if you give us the week to prepare, we're ready for Armageddon. Now, it didn't mean things didn't go bad. They did, every time, but greatly mitigated. So I guess where the question of where some of us are struggling is, we can talk about reasonable and prudent. What does that mean? I mean, I know what it means, but it's relative. And if equipment didn't perform because of lines freezing and what, I get it, that happens. But it's always going to be that question like, but should it? Or should it have? In any event, you're not sure that if the systems had performed as they should have, it would have met the increased loads? Or you would think
I don't know the exact numbers to make that decision, because we did, curtail, and I don't know where the load would have gone versus what we should be fine. I mean, if every single thing we own was online, regardless of, a planned outage, of course, yes. But
okay, I have no more questions. Thank you, Mr. McKay and Ms. Harrington. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Caston. Now, any redirect on those questions?
None, thank you, Chair.
Commissioner Irvin?
I'm sorry, I thought we got to commissioner questions, but maybe not.
Go ahead.
I had a follow-up question for the panel.
Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Sure, briefly. Mr. McKay, could you tell us why the coal plant failed? Have you determined that yet?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't. That's not under my, what I do. So I really don't know the answer to that.
I understand. What about the gas plant? Do you know what happened there to cause it to fail?
Once again, I know it. I don't know the exact reason. I'm not totally familiar with what happened.
Okay. So, are you still in a process of trying to review this incident and make changes, or where are you in terms of that piece?
There's an extensive internal review of all of our process, especially what happened during the winter, Storm Elliott. Yes, I think I mentioned yesterday, we did some benchmarking. We've done a lot of, looked at a lot of even the load forecasts, all types of things. So we are we're in flight of implementing some of those and, working on our best practices and some of the other things that we've come up with. So it's not all done by any means, but I know it was a very thorough review.
Thank you. And as a part of the review process, is there going to be some kind of report or recommendation that comes out of it from Duke? Is that something we can expect, or will that happen, or is it just going to be internal?
I know that it is internal. I don't know if it's going to be shared externally.
All right. Okay. Have you taken any further winterization steps at the two plants that failed, the coal-fired plant and the natural gas combined cycle plant? Do you know why they failed?
No, Mr. Commissioner, I don't. I'm sure they're addressing the issue, but I don't know exactly what they're doing.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions I have.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioners, anything further? Ms. Brown? I think you said no redirect.
No redirect. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. McClay, Ms. Harrington, thank you very much.
Thank
You
you.
may stand down.
Thank you.
Is there anything further?
Chair Belzer, we'd ask for the opportunity to do a brief closing.
Yes, ma'am. Is that everybody? Anyway,
Chair Belzer.
Commissioner Williams.
I just wanted to clarify that while we had talked about a late filed exhibit, we wanted to hear from you as part of this, the testimony today in lieu of that. So there will be no request for a late filed exhibit.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate that. Ms. Brown, you'd like to make a closing?
I'll be very brief. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, we really appreciate your time and attention to this matter. I know that we've covered a lot of ground here the last couple of days. The company would like to emphasize that no party in this case has recommended a disallowance or made any allegations of imprudence in this year's fuel proceeding, nor have any witnesses in this matter challenged the fuel factors proposed by witness Harrington. In fact, under the totality of the circumstances, ORS witness Dr. Rumpani conducted her assessment and determined that the company's actions were prudent and reasonable. No party or qualified expert has rebutted that testimony. Given the party's stipulation on Winter Storm Elliott purchase power costs, coupled with the unrebutted testimony regarding the reasonableness and prudence of DEP's operations, procurement practices, and the fuel costs incurred, the Commission should approve the fuel factors as proposed in accordance with the fuel statute. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brown. Newcourt, do you have any closing?
No, Madam Chair.
Say CCL, do you desire any closing?
We also don't have a closing.
Thank you. Office of Regulatory Staff?
No closing.
Thank you. Is there anything further to come before the Commission this afternoon in this proceeding? I'd like to thank the parties, the witnesses, all who have put up with us the last couple of days. It's an important case. It's important to the company. It's important to the parties and to the commissioners. And so thank you for your attention and your detail. And with that, have y'all discussed with Staff Council dates for proposed orders? Have y'all decided on one yet? Okay, y'all will finalize that via email. Is that correct? Okay.
We're happy to do that.
And Staff Council will follow up with y'all on dates for proposed orders. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you very much.